Hey Team Bio, okay, so today's screencast is on the biological concept of fitness. So when you think of fitness, you probably think of like going to the gym, lifting weights, and getting buff, or running outside on the track and getting svelte. But when we talk about biological fitness, it's not one and the same thing. I'm going to write down the definition of fitness and then come back once I have it written down. Okay, so the biological definition of fitness is the ability to survive and reproduce. Remember, it's important to survive. If you can't survive, then you won't reproduce. But if you're surviving without reproducing, then you're not doing much in terms of fitness. So that you maintain the transfer of genes from one generation to the next. It's not enough just to be healthy. You have to pass on your genes. And you could be a very healthy individual, but if you're not actually having sex and passing on your genes to the next generation, then you are not fit. You will have a fitness of 0. Okay, so fitness also has a mathematical component to it, and I'm going to explain that here. So absolute fitness is the ratio of individuals with the allele before and after one round of selection. So basically one round, one generation. I'm going to write that down. Okay, so ratio of individuals with allele before and after selection period. So you can think of selection period as one generation. So if we start out, we have the number of the allele before the selection. So this would basically be the number of people in generation, the parental generation with the allele. And then we look at their children, and we look at the number of individuals with the allele after. This is going to be equal to our W absolute, or absolute fitness. Now it's pretty easy to see from this equation that if absolute fitness is greater than 1, then the number of people that have this allele after, so like the number of kids with this allele, is greater than the number of parents with this allele. So this suggests to us that the allele is beneficial in some way. It's being positively selected for. If absolute fitness is less than 1, this means there were more parents with the allele than there are children, so it implies that this is some sort of detrimental allele and it's being actively selected against. And if W... I'm sorry, a fruit fly just flew into my mouth. That was gross. Okay. If absolute fitness is equal to 0, that means that the number of children after, or basically the number of children with the allele is the same as the number of parents with that allele. So it's some sort of neutral or stable, not changing allele. So the fitness of that is 1. Okay, so basically the whole point of being alive is to be healthy and beautiful enough to attract a mate or many mates and have a lot of sex and pass on your genes to the next generation, and then you are very, very fit if a lot of your offspring also survive and reproduce. So it's kind of useful to think about selection and evolution happening on the level of the gene. Pretty famous evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins published a book. It's called The Selfish Gene. And he basically said that it's the goal of a gene, say it starts out here in generation X, it's the goal of the gene to be passed on to G1, to G2, to G3, and so on and so forth. So a selfish gene or a gene wants to be associated with a good organism that can move it through space and time so that it continues living on. Now, it's important to remember here that genes are not sentient organisms. They're not thinking. But even though they're not thinking, they still have this goal of moving down the generations. So they're not actively thinking about anything. They're not, as I said, they're not sentient, but they need to be good enough to stick around. So say this gene X here, is a good gene. It wants to be associated with a good organism. If it's bad, then it will never be passed on because the generation 2 organisms that have it are not going to be able to survive or not be able to reproduce. So if it's a crappy gene, you get lower fitness for that organism, and then the gene is not passed on. So you can really think of a body just as a transport machine for genes. That's the whole goal of a body. So as you looked at in your courtship videos, organisms are displaying either some sort of dance, or sometimes they fight, or offer presents, but the whole goal of courtship is to find a suitable mate who also has a set of good genes so that you can mix your good genes together and they can be passed on to the next generation, which will also have good genes and can find a suitable mate, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the biological concept of fitness, the ability to survive and reproduce.